the partnership between the private sector and the government in particular projects, especially identifying model projects that everybody can follow. I would like to cite the Pasig River Rehabilitation Project as a good example of private sector and government cooperation. That is a good model. Second, I would like also to say that waste management is a problem that should really be attended to not just by national government.
We must enforce our anti-pollution laws. That is a given requirement in our national life. We must enforce our Clean Air Act. And then we must adopt a law that will prohibit the disposal or the throwing of non-biodegradable materials and substances in our streams and rivers. And perhaps one effort that we could do is to plant more trees to absorb the carbon dioxide that is being emitted in our urban cities. Now, this would require funding, and so we must see to it that a certain a substantial portion of our budget must be allotted.
Pursuant to the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, we must operationalize an action agenda for sustainable development. By sustainable development, I mean that one generation should provide for its needs without compromising the ability of the next generations to provide for their own needs. And therefore, our action agenda must cover all the ecosystems. Number one, upland or forest. Number two, coastal or marine. Number three, urban. Number four, fresh water. And number five, agriculture or lowland. We must pass the Clean Air Act. The Senate has already passed the Bicameral Conference Committee report, but the House of Representatives has not yet done so. We must also pass not only the Clean Air Act, but the Clean Water Act. And most of all, we must implement existing laws. So this boils down to a question of administration.
Definitely, we must attend to the ecology because a nation has only two resources, human resource and natural resources. If we destroy our environment, we also destroy ourselves. In fact, I wrote a book in the Circles of Life. The first chapter is Ecological Order. And one of the things that I did here in Metro Manila was to plant a lot of trees. We produced about 500,000 seedlings in the Manila Seedling Bank because every human being needs 8 trees for oxygen. And we planted about 92 million trees here in Metro Manila to service the people here at. And the trees also, the roots of the trees expand during the rainy season, serves as water deposits of during the rainy season expels this. So it is important that we take care of the ecological balance of our country, and at the same time we must make sure that our waters are taken care of.
Ever on the lookout for ways and means by which it can live up to its commitment to public service in the context of the legal profession, the WILUSI tonight joins the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, the Philippine Bar Association, in sponsoring, together with the RPN9 and the KBP, this Presidential Candidates Forum to help us make a truly informed and intelligent choice.
Of continuing the Ramos economic policies and programs on liberalization and privatization. Yet there is hardly anything left to liberalize or privatize. What then do you mean by the continuation of the Ramos economic program? If you are not in accord with the administration's policies, what Ramos policies will undergo a change under your presidency?
I adhere to the school of thought that whether or not the Philippines consents, globalization is an international phenomenon that cannot be stopped dead in its tracks just because one third world country refuses to cooperate with the mainstream. But all the same, I will raise a red flag. I will say that at this point, the Ramos administration is guilty of liberalizing too much and too early. It should have time, and it should have observed sequencing in liberalization. For example, we should not have lowered tariffs. We now have the lowest tariffs of most of the Southeast Asian countries. We should not have lowered tariffs unless the following were present. And they were not present when the administration did lower tariffs, which is one of the reasons why we are now undergoing our own version of economic meltdown. Number one, we should have first lowered power costs. Power costs in the Philippines today are the highest in the region, or maybe number two at the very least. Number two, we should have strengthened our anti-dumping laws.
Globalization, liberalization is a matter of fact. We can no longer reverse it. We are a member of an international trading community. We are a signatory to the GATT-WTO Uruguay Round Treaty, and so therefore we must live with that. But there are certain safeguards that are allowed to us. We can craft a countervailing duty measure. We can craft an anti-dumping measure. We can craft a law that will impose certain higher duties on so-called absurd or unusual surge, rather unusual surge in importation to protect our industries. Now, the exchange rate crisis is a godsend help to us because it increased the cost of goods that are being imported and the base of the tariff.
Mrs. Marcos?
Eventually, there should be a vision of a global vision, but definitely we must prioritize first on our national commitment to ensure economic progress through self-reliance and basing it, of course, in the spirit of democracy that should be started in the very root and foundation of society in the barangay, which is the extended family. We believe in globalization only after we have prioritized our development, economic development on our national commitment and priority.
First of all, we must accept that we must fulfill all our commitments under the World Trade Organization arrangements. But having said that, I would like to mention two things. One, while we obey, while we follow, we must see to it that all the other countries are following and observing the WTO agreements, because there are some occasions when the other countries, particularly bigger countries, try to ignore their own commitments to the WTO. Second, I think that we should fulfill our commitments to our own domestic businesses to give them the opportunity to adjust to this sudden, and I say sudden, liberalized regime of investment and trade. And that means particularly giving them the infrastructure that they need, which we promised but has not really been put in place.
In no uncertain terms, will you risk or will you have the political will to win away from our traditional trading partners like the United States and Japan and shift our priorities to other countries like the European Union?
Well, it depends upon the pricing of our goods. If we get better terms from European markets, why not? But if the